In my last video where I delved into how to apply the Moneyball approach in Football Manager using FMDataLab, I mentioned towards the end of that video that after actually using the Moneyball tool and not just for testing, I had a few ideas for making the tool even better. Well, I've been busy and I'm excited to announce the latest FMDataLab Moneyball updates are now live. Full details are in the September changelog page on FMDataLab, which you can check out via the link that's on screen right now or in the footer of fmdatalab.com. Let's delve into the first big change, and it's probably the one that's been requested the most, and that's the ability to create your very own custom computed Moneyball stats. If you've ever thought these computed stats are good, but they don't quite cover the metrics I require for the style of player I want, well, then this feature is for you. To get started using this new feature, upload a Moneyball file to the Moneyball page. Once it's uploaded, you will see a new button labelled Custom Stats. Give that button a click and you'll open up a dialog window with a form for adding your custom stats. You can create up to 6 custom computed stats, and for each computed stat, you'll need to choose between 3 and 12 individual statistics. This lets you mix and match different metrics to fine-tune your strategy for finding the perfect player. Start by clicking the Add New Custom Statistics button. You'll need to give your custom stat a unique name. Next, in the Weighted Statistics section, you can choose a stat from the Add New Statistics dropdown. And for each stat you add, you can set a weighted multiplier figure between 0 and 10 to indicate how important that stat is in your custom computed stat. The higher the weight, the more influence it has in the overall calculation for your custom computed stat. These custom stats will be retained across all Moneyball uploads as long as you're using the same browser and device, but if you switch browsers, go incognito or use another device, for example, you'll have to set them up again as they're stored within your current browser session. Once you've created all your custom stats will be available throughout the Moneyball tool. In the Moneyball table, they'll show up in the computed column group, right alongside the standard computed stats, where you can see each player's percentile ranking for your custom stats. In the scatter chart view, you can select your custom computed stats as access points using the drop-down menus. When you click on a player's name in the Moneyball table, it brings up the player panel. In here, you can choose any of your custom stats from the statistic dropdown in the comparison chart section, and the stats you've selected for your custom stat will then be plotted in the radar chart below. Also in the player panel, you'll notice that what used to be called the top 5 statistics section has now expanded to be top 10 statistics. This provides a more comprehensive insight into the key performance areas where a player excels, as I felt 5 perhaps was a bit too narrow. And also, if any of your custom computed stats rank highly enough to be a player's top 10 stats, they'll show up here too. And finally, in the statistics section of the player panel, your custom computed stats will be listed alongside all the other computed stats in the computed section. You have the flexibility to remove any of your custom computed stats with ease. Simply click on the bin icon or click the Delete Custom Statistic button on the specific custom stat you wish to delete. If you decide you want to remove all your custom stats, you can do so by clicking the Delete Custom Stats button located at the bottom of the dialog window. Hopefully this new feature adds even more value to your Moneyball experience. So we're certainly not stopping there. There's plenty more to delve into with these latest updates. The next feature on our list is the ability to toggle percentile values in the Moneyball player panel. Now, this feature simply allows you to view percentile data for various stats across the player panel with just a click of a button. This feature offers a quality of life improvement for analysing players' performance relative to others in your uploaded file. Before, these raw statistic values were a bit like looking at a jigsaw puzzle with half the pieces missing, where you had not much context to work with. But now you can see exactly how a player stacks up, not just against every player in your file, but also within specific positions. More on that in a moment. So you can now access percentile figures for a variety of stats in both the comparison chart and the statistics section in the player panel. In the comparison chart section, you'll notice the new Show Percentiles button right next to the comparison chart tile. Click that and boom, your raw stats are replaced with percentile ranks on the radar chart. This gives you a clear picture of how a selected player performs in comparison with others in your uploaded dataset and across the top 5 leagues dataset I mentioned in my first Moneyball video. Now, when you adjust the position dropdown, the percentile ranks in the comparison chart will update automatically to reflect your selection. This means that the data points on the radar chart will show how each stat stacks up against other players in that selected position, unlike the default percentile rank, which takes all player stat values into account. This feature allows you to see how a player compares within their position. For instance, this becomes useful if you take like a striker for example, and a striker's non-penalty XG per 90 might look impressive across the board, but when you zero in strikers only, the percentile rank gives you a more accurate gauge of their expected goal scoring prowess, with no more inflated ranks, as the percentiles will exclude more players who tend not to find themselves in goal scoring positions. And if you want to switch back to the original raw stats in the comparison chart, just click the Hide Percentiles button. Simple as that. Now if we scroll down to the statistics section, this functionality works the same way and is also triggered by that Show Percentiles button. What's handy here is that button is synchronized with the other one in the comparison chart, so toggling it in one place updates it in the others. When you adjust the position percentiles drop down in the statistics section, the percentile ranks will adjust accordingly, reflecting the selected position. This ensures each non-computed stats percentile rank is relative to the chosen position. Another example of why this is useful looking at percentiles within a position is take a defensive midfielder's tackles completed per 90, which might not look impressive across all positions as centre backs tend to hog all the tackling glory after all, but when you filter for defensive midfielders only, this player might shoot up the ranks in comparison to all the other players that are defensive midfielders. So, if you're in the hunt for a defensive midfielder who excels in completing tackles per 90, the initial percentile across all positions might have made you think twice. But when you see how it stacks up against his peers in the defensive midfield position, he's actually one of the best. That's why I believe viewing a player's percentile rank for a stat within their selected position is absolutely invaluable and offers more context than comparing it against all players. Finally, updating the position drop down here will also synchronize the position drop downs in both the comparison chart and key area section, keeping everything in sync. So I'll hold my hands up for the next feature, as this was a bit of an oversight on my part. I completely forgot to include it initially and only realised my mistake in the last video, so yeah, sorry about that one. But better late than never. This new feature allows you to view the player panel directly within the Moneyball scatter chart by simply clicking on a player's data point in the chart. This player panel is identical to the one that you access via the Moneyball table view. What's great about this is that you no longer need to flick back and forth between the scatter chart and Moneyball table view just to find a player and view their details. Now everything you need is right at your fingertips within the scatter chart itself. Just click on the relevant data point and voila, you've got all the granular player info and stats that you need. Of course, you can still hover over a data point for a quick tooltip of the player's overview, but if you're after a deep dive into a player's profile, a simple click on the data point will take you there. So, moving on to the next feature, I've introduced a few more stat columns to the Moneyball tool, because who doesn't love a bit more data to pore over? These new additions fall into two distinct categories. First, we already have the overperformance metrics, but now I've added overperformance metrics per 90 values. Now, I can't say for sure how much mileage you'll actually get out of these, but they were straightforward to implement, so why not give them a whirl? And secondly, after my last video, I noticed a glaring absence of goalkeeper stats when I was scouting for keepers. So I've gone ahead and rectified that by incorporating a range of new goalkeeper stats. For a full breakdown of these new additions, head over to the September changelog where you'll find all the details laid out in the new Moneyball column section. It's also worth mentioning that some of these new stats rely on a new metric that frankly is probably in most cases a little inaccurate, but not miles off, and that's shots on target against. Now, why is this stat a little bit inaccurate? Well, this particular stat aims to calculate the total number of shots on target a goalkeeper faces by adding together the total number of saves and the total goals conceded to attempt to get the total shots on target against. However, bear in mind that not every goal conceded comes from a shot on target. Think of own goals or possibly like deflected goals. So, when you're interpreting this stat, or any other stat that uses it, do so with a pinch of caution, as it might not be entirely accurate. I've made sure to detail any stats that rely on this calculation in the info icon tooltips within the Moneyball table. Also, there's been an update to the save percentage stat as well. This stat reflects the percentage of shots faced that a goalkeeper successfully stops. However, a word of warning, Football Manager tends to miscalculate this one, especially in the player search and shortlist views, where you might stumble across some rather bizarre negative percentages, so take this stat also with a bit of caution, as it might not always be correct. Now, in cases where this exported save percentage stat has a value of 0 or less, which would clearly indicate some sort of error, I've implemented an alternative calculation method. This involves dividing the total number of saves by the shots on target against, and then multiplying that number by 100 to get a more accurate save percentage. However, since this method also relies on that previously mentioned shots on target against stat, you will want to be cautious with your interpretation, given the potential inaccuracy of the shots on target against stat as mentioned earlier. But at least it will give you a better idea than some weird negative figure. So sticking with the goalkeeper theme, let's tackle an issue that's been sort of lurking in the background. Previously, the goalkeeping actions per 90 action stat, the goalkeeping computed stat, and the saves and conceded column groups were presenting values and, more importantly, percentile rankings for players who weren't actually goalkeepers. This made it a little difficult to get an accurate read on a goalkeeper's performance compared to their goalkeeping peers. You may have noticed that the percentiles were often overly generous, with many goalkeepers finding themselves in the 90th plus percentile, which could give you a rather misleading impression of their abilities as a goalkeeper, all because they were being compared alongside outfield players. To address this, I made sure that the goalkeeping actions per 90 stat, the goalkeeping computed stat, and the saves and conceded column group stats now only show values and percentiles for players actually eligible to play as goalkeepers. This adjustment ensures a more accurate and fair evaluation, allowing for comparisons that genuinely reflect a goalkeeper's performance. For instance, if you look on screen now, you might have previously looked at Andre Onana sitting comfortably in a 94th percentile for the goalkeeping computed stat and thought, not bad at all, but now with these adjustments, we can now compare him solely against other goalkeepers. The truth's revealed, he actually falls into the 30th percentile. That previous higher ranking was simply inflated because non-goalkeepers were being thrown into the mix, so if all players in your list, he was better than 94% of them, but now it's only 30% of goalkeepers. So with these updates, I'm hoping it'll make it a little bit easier to find your ideal shot stopper. Let's revisit the comparison chart for our next update. Now, for the keen-eyed amongst you, you might have already noticed some additional enhancements here, but for the rest of you, let me walk through the latest improvements. Comparison chart is now being enhanced with the introduction of 2 new data points, offering a more comprehensive analysis of player performance. Albeit it might look a little bit cluttered now, but you know. First, we have the top 5% metric, denoted by a fluorescent pink line. I'm not sure what the actual colour term is for that, but you know, the bright pink one. This metric represents the top 5% of players for each stat, drawn directly from your uploaded file. It's tailored either by the selected position or across all positions by default, allowing you to gauge how your chosen player stacks up against the creme de la creme in each computed or action stat. This provides a sharper lens through which to evaluate your player's performance against the very best in your dataset. Next, marked by a peach line, I think that's right, we have the top 5% in the top 5 leagues. This metric is calculated by the top 5% of players in each stat, based on the dataset of players who clocked over 2,000 minutes by the end of a 2024 season across the top 5 leagues. This data identifies the elite performers in each stat. It's an invaluable tool for understanding how your player measures up, not just within your dataset, but also against the players in the elite leagues. Also, the best player, which is represented by the yellow line, is now affected by the position. As before, it was just selecting the best player for that stat. Now it's showing the best player within a position. So it's all positions, it's going to find the best player. So the final change we have here was actually done a little while ago, but it's worth mentioning now that if you ever come across an error, there is now a dialog window that describes what actions you should take. So some of it may be that you're trying to upload a row scoring file to Moneyball. It will now help you direct you to the right place. But other people have issues, I think, initially with skins, potentially using a different language as well. So in these sort of cases, a lot of the times all you need to do is clear your in-game cache, and then after you do that, re-import the view. Both of those together are very important. You can't just do one or the other. Clearing the cache, re-import your view will usually fix most cases. There was another user who had an issue where that didn't work, and they thankfully provided me with 3 different files, sort of an alternative views. So now within the zip file, so if you download the new zip file, there will be an alternative views directory, and in there, just in case you have issues still after all those changes, this is maybe where you want to go. So that wraps up the September updates for FMDataLab. I hope these new features prove invaluable in your quest to unearth the next hidden gem for your squad. As ever, if you encounter any issues or have any suggestions for future enhancements, don't hesitate to reach out. I've already got some ideas brewing for the next update. One I'm particularly excited about is the best 11 feature with a chosen creative tactic, which I briefly showcased in a spreadsheet form during my last video. This will also include a comparison tool of your team's roll scores against the rest of your league, offering an insight into where you stand against your competition and highlighting areas you might need to strengthen to clinch that league title. I'd love to hear your thoughts on these new features, so do drop a comment below. And if you've crafted any of your own custom stats, let me know what you've come up with. And of course, if you haven't already, a like and a subscribe would be greatly appreciated. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye for now.